Welcome to a fortnightly interjection, and I'm sure many of you are aware of Black Lives Matter at the moment, and this is an interview which tackles some of those questions, some of those reflections, and a really, really important conversation to be having right now. This is one of those in-betweeny podcast episodes, and I'm aware that during COVID there's been a few that have been related to what's happening in the world at the moment. I think this is a really, really important conversation, and for those of you who can get a chance to also go and watch this on YouTube, please do so. And, you know, I'm sure that some of you will let me know exactly how you feel after the end of this episode, and, you know, all feedback welcome. If it's personal and attacking, then I shall thank you for your time. And I'm sure that some of you will want to really, really show this between your friends, colleagues, and that's what it's been done for. See you next time. There's no intro music on this one because I'm just rushing to get it out. Okay, take care of yourselves. Be well, stay safe. Speak soon. Welcome to Cyber Synapse. This is another kind of rushed podcast in terms of where I'm coming from at the moment, and this is because we're in another hot topic, and the climate that we're currently under requires this uncomfortable conversation. And I'm here because I need to learn more, I need to understand more, and this is why I'm doing this conversation with the person who I'm going to interview today, Darryl Edwards. So he's a former investment banking technologist, and he turned movement coach and author. He's the founder of Primal Play Method, and which is a physical activity, health, and play-based service. And also, you've kind of fused together the evolutionary biology with the science of physical activity and play psychology. And this is to inspire humans, regardless of age, ability, or disability, to transform their health by making physical activity fun and engaging. We're going to come back to that point, Darryl, before we even kind of start here. In terms of your approach to what you've developed is about humans. It's not about kind of people being segregated in any way, shape or form. And for those people who are sitting listening, and for those who might be watching, you'll see where I'm going in a minute. Darryl has featured on documentaries, TV, radio, podcasts, and international press. He's the author of a best-selling book, Animal Moves, and has released a range of fun fitness cards for adults, juniors, infants, office workers, fitness professionals, called the Animal Moves deck. He's also a TED Talk and keynote speaker, and this TED Talk has already been watched about 650,000 times. So whilst that sounds like I've just given you, let's call it your CV introduction there, Darryl, this is to show people I'm talking to a critical thinker. That's the reason you're here, because one of the things I've learned about you, Darryl, over the past year really, is that you do challenge the narrative, and you have a whole heap of expertise. This doesn't come from your academic qualifications. This is about you as a lived experience person. You are a human being with a whole heap of information, and you know those experiences that you've gone through, which we're likely to talk about today. And I really want to have this uncomfortable conversation, not between you and I, but with other people listening, about what's happening right now around Black Lives Matter. But also it's about empathy and that socioeconomic status that you spoke so beautifully about in one of the Instagram lives that you did. So welcome, Darryl. And
well, thank you for such a great introduction, and I really appreciate being on this podcast, Kath. So thank you.
So should we just dive straight in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I'm gonna hand the floor over to you, Darryl, because I think I know. Well, no, I'm just gonna be really truthful. I know jack shit. In terms of my understanding of racism, I think I might know stuff. I might be able to say, yes, I've got white privilege and that, but realistically, I don't know. I don't know enough, and I need to learn and I need to understand. And the only way I can do that is by opening the floor up to somebody like yourself to kind of explain why this problem exists and where we're going with it. So,
Yeah, so I mean, that's a really interesting point, and I've certainly struggled with speaking to somebody who is not of my heritage, who says, I, I don't really understand how it can be for you, and I've never been in your shoes, and I want to hear your experiences. And I suppose the first thing that I would like to say is, and I've just produced this kind of series of kind of comic strips
mm,
talking about Black Lives Matter and some of the conversations that I've had. And so one conversation I kind of termed "Broken Legs Matter," and a patient going to see their doctor,
hmm
the patient saying, you know, I've I've got a broken leg. Can you help me? And the doctor doesn't seem to be that interested. And the patient's like, look, I really appreciate your support. I want to talk about this. I want to spread the word in relation to this. And it's like, I've got a hashtag, broken legs matter.
hmm
And the doctor goes, actually, that's very disrespectful. I can't believe you're only focusing on broken legs. Hashtag all limbs matter. And
yeah,
this is part of the issue in relation to, um, if we're speaking about a specific problem, if we're speaking about a specific issue, there aren't many examples of where people will say, well, hold on a second, let's talk about everything else as well at the
hmm
same time. So another example would be, I have um, breast cancer. As a man, there's a very small percentage chance that I can have breast cancer. So I want to talk about breast cancer. I want to align myself to the breast cancer cause. And the comment coming back being, hold on a second, why just talk about breast cancer? What about lung cancer and liver cancer and
yeah,
stomach cancer and all these other cancers? They're just as important. Well, of course they're important, but in this instance, I want to talk about the cancer that I
hmm
have and where I need some help and support. And I think sometimes we need these metaphors for people to understand how farcical and ludicrous it is when we have these Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter discussions.
yeah,
There's a particular problem, there's a particular issue, there's a particular bit of pain where we need a spotlight, and that's what we want to be focusing on. And I think it also helps when we have the discussion around, I don't really understand what that's like. And so again, I think about, you just have to use empathy. You know,
yeah,
for example, I have no idea what it's like to be female. I have no idea what it's like to feel fear walking late at night or even during the day, to be accosted for, my gender,
hmm
to be sexually abused, to be harassed. I have no idea what that's like, but I can certainly empathize. I can certainly spend time considering and listening to the voice of victims, of listening to people's experiences, and recognizing that those experiences, there's a scale, from what some people may regard as trivial, but it's still extremely traumatic, to the most severe and horrendous and devastating of actions committed based on sexism. I can appreciate that even as a man. So I think I'm sometimes disappointed with some of those discussions,
hmm
because if a woman said to me, well, you just have no idea, you have no idea what it's like. Well, yes, you're right. I have not sat in your shoes. I have not been in your shoes, but I'm certainly willing to listen. I'm certainly willing to empathize, and I can certainly understand why you may feel fear, pain, scared, traumatized. I can understand that. That part I can understand,
yes,
right? So I think we need to be able to distinguish between um, being within somebody else's shoes and being able to ally ourselves and stand with people who have been through particular experiences. And so that's the first thing that I wanted to share.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose the second thing is that for myself, achieving success within my previous career within investment banking, and I had so many challenges. One challenge being from a very poor background, being the first child within my family to go to university. There was no one that I knew, very few people actually I knew that went to university within my community. So there were a lot of obstacles in the way. I went to a grammar school. I was very academic. I did very, very well. Had hit a few hurdles on the way, but I managed to do computer science at university. That became my career. I worked for Microsoft back in the 90s, very
Mm-hmm.
the most successful IT company in the world back then. Got headhunted by investment banks. Wanted to make more money, even more money, more money. I want to be successful, and the experiences at school in terms of racism, right through to university, right through to applying for the first roles, and recognizing that even as I got more and more successful, believing that I would face less challenges, there were the same number of challenges. There were the same number of frequency of issues. The doubt, the same sort of doubts that I would often have to question my ability. Like, hold on a second, why am I still being questioned, even though I've achieved all of these things and I have all of this extensive experience? Why do I still feel as if I have to be on the back foot all of the time? Why am I not compared in the same way as my peers?
Mm.
Why do I have to be twice as good to be seen as an equal?
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
yeah.
think you'd mentioned in one of your talks about so one of the times you were talking, you'd said you'd gone for a job and you were stood in between two other people who were both Caucasian, white,
Mm.
and the person walked over and was looking for Mr. Edwards and kind of didn't look at you and walked away again. And as you were telling the story, I was getting angrier and angrier, thinking, what is going on here? What? And that is my level of kind of empathy and experience. Is I can imagine what that was like for you at the time, that perhaps you were feeling that anger, but also
Oh,
for me, I don't know whether you were in a place of it's always like this is the apathy of racism, this is what I have to do to achieve. And
yeah. It's if I'm speaking to other black professionals about an incident like that, we would laugh. We would have a laugh and joke about it, not because it's funny, but because it happens all of the time. Like it's almost like a shared experience. Like, oh my
mm,
goodness,
mm-hmm,
have a listen to this. If you and you almost have to make light of it because it is so traumatic. Because it does really. It's like another, knife. Another kind of being stabbed again and again. Like that's what it kind of feels like, an emotional kind of stabbing. And in that situation, and that was probably midway through my career, in my previous career. So I'd already, qualified, lots of really good experience. I was being approached. I didn't have to look for work. It was like that,
yeah,
Mr. Edwards, we want you. So having this telephone interview, being offered the job, being paid, more than I'd ever been paid before. I mean, it was like pretty much whatever you want, we're happy to pay. So in the context of that, going to day one in my role, dressed to the nines in a suit, sitting next to two individuals, and the receptionist saying, "Mr. Edwards is over there." They're pointing at me, but yet the individual who was going to be my boss came down and looked at all three of us and was like, okay, you, Mr. Edwards, on the left, you, Mr. Edwards, on the right. And I'm sitting there going, I'm not going to say anything at all. I'll be here waiting for him to recognize he's made a mistake. And on the third time coming back to me, after having a go at the receptionist, like, I thought you said Mr. Edwards was sitting over there. He's right, and he's right there. And he came over to me and he was bright red. He was like, he couldn't look me in the eye. He was very embarrassed and apologetic. I'm really sorry. Please don't think that I'm a racist. I didn't mean it. Didn't mean anything by it. And I kind of said to him, like, well, and even when I had a conversation with him, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to be working for this guy.
Yeah.
I want to be fired on day one by speaking up too loudly? Like that's the position that you're in. Mm-hmm. So I had a very diplomatic conversation with him, and I said, well, what do you have an explanation? Just explain to me what do you mean? What do you mean exactly? And he kind of mumbled and just didn't have much to say. Bluster, getting more concerned that I might speak to human resources, and you're not going to speak to anyone about this, are you? And so yeah, that happened, and in some respects, I wish I had have done more. I probably wish I had have gone to HR and day one and said, actually, this is what's happened. But I also kind of know that there wouldn't have been a great outcome. I don't think anything would have been done. I think my card would have been marked, and I would have been seen as a troublemaker, and I wouldn't have lasted long within that organization. That's what I fear would have happened. And so yeah, I continued working there, and I continued to have those experiences many times. And because I became a contractor, which is basically like an independent consultant, mm-hmm. I'd be working for lots of different organizations on a very regular basis. So I might have a 3-month contract, a 6-month contract. So I ended up working for scores of banks, and so there'd just be so many incidents. I'd have hundreds of interviews. So I probably had a good several hundred interviews. And so when you start seeing that there was a significant minority of those, whereby you were judged as soon as you'd walk in, and you'd see people like there's like a double take. You'd see the interview panel kind of looking at each other like, they wouldn't look me in the eye. They wouldn't know what to say to me during an interview. And I'm like, this is an unusual interview. They struggle to shake your hand. But there was all these very subtle signals of not being happy about this situation, of passing psychometric tests and technical tests and acing the tests, and being told, oh, we're still not sure if you're the candidate for us. Mm-hmm. So what can you give us a reason why? I would love to know, so I can improve, I can get better. Oh, not really. How did I do in my testing? Oh, testing was 100%. You passed with flying colors. Okay. So psychometric tests. Yeah, you'd probably fit in with our organization. Yeah, no issues there. Very logical, very analytical. That's exactly what we need for somebody in your field. Okay, so why? Mm-hmm. Well, we just didn't feel there was the right fit. And of course, I didn't want to assume on every occasion that it was because of racism. I wanted to think the best of people, but you start to become aware of those subtleties, of that covert display of racism. You're aware that you're not going to be told to your face, it's because you're black. That's why. Yeah. Sorry, that's the reason. That's not going to happen. And that's a landscape you're trying to traverse. And I felt that my only savior was trying to become more successful by trying to work harder than my peers, doing more hours, being more successful, being known as the best in my field, ensuring that when I attended an interview, I was like, I just need to make sure I'm the best candidate here. That's hands down. I can't give them any reason to doubt me. I have to be the best. And there were times when I would do like 5 interviews, and I would get a job offers for 4. So that was a level of expertise and demand for my skills at particular points. But even then, there would still be there would still be incidents like that. But I don't want to say it was just in the professional arena. Even in my personal life, I would experience this. I'd experience this in my, being stopped by the police walking down the street, or going for a run. Why are you running? Oh, I'm training for a 5K. Stop being cheeky. No, I'm not being cheeky. I'm actually doing a 5K or a 10K.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have these really difficult conversations whereby they want to create some conflict whereby they can say, right, we're going to arrest you, we're going to charge you, what for, for resisting arrest, or so that those situations they were trying to escalate you, even though there was no reason to stop and search me. There was no reason to stop me in my car. Some of the best reasons were things like, we're stopping you because you're driving too slowly. We're stopping you because it's too late at night, it's too early in the morning. You're in the wrong neighborhood. Well, I actually live here. How do you know I'm in the wrong neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember once they said you're in the wrong neighborhood, and they checked the registration, and I had all my documents, and I'm like, you do realize that this address is just around the corner, right? Like, can you isn't this quite ironic what you're saying? Like, I'm showing my document, I'm showing my proof of address, the vehicle's registered to me, and I live just like a few hundred meters away, and you're stopping me, telling me I'm in the wrong neighborhood. And of course, even that doesn't go down well. That's seen as antagonizing and difficult. So yeah, there were just so many of those incidents, and you realize it's a common experience, and you realize that my success didn't make, of course there were some aspects of life that were better because of progress, for sure, because of the changes, societal changes, yes. Because I was earning a certain amount of money, yes, there were significant benefits to that lifestyle. But in terms of how I'd be viewed, people don't look at you and say, oh well, I know their character. They just make an assumption of who you are, and if it's based on the color of your skin, it could be negative. And in a lot of those instances, it was a negative reaction just by looking at the color of my skin, just by judging me, knowing nothing about me, deciding whether I could do the job or not, just based on the color of my skin. So this is a problem, and this problem is systemic, and it's structural, and it's outside of somebody as an individual being racist or not. There's a culture, unfortunately, of institutionalized racism that exists, that many of us have to battle with, and many others are saying doesn't exist, or they're invisible to it, or they benefit from this structure. So it's very difficult to let go of that benefit and that privilege.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out of that conversation there, Darryl. I mean, apart from the fact that I feel, I don't know what I feel at times. I feel numb, I feel angry, I feel sad, I feel despondent. There's so much that goes on when you're talking about how can we do this to each other. What would that experience be like? And I'm just thinking about the listeners here in terms of empathy. We can do that. So there's varying styles of empathy, and we can do that cognitive, which is I can imagine, I can think about what it's like. But yeah. I'm talking about, for people listening, I don't know how much that hit you in what we call the feels now. That's like the 2020 version of kind of talking about emotions, isn't it? Oh, it hit me right in the feels. How much of that do people really, really feel when they're talking and listening, or when they're listening to you? Because I was, as you were talking, going, I've never had to think like that. I've never had, I think when you did one of your Instagram lives, you were talking with somebody, and she said, I think it was the fasting doctor, and she said when she's in her car, she has her documents up on the sun visor because
Mm,
she's too frightened to do anything other than put her hands up and go, and pull the sun visor down so that the police officer. And I sat there, and I'm going to do my typical Kath thing now, and I'm aware that people are beginning to learn that I'm a bit of a sweary person, but I just went, fuck. That had never entered my mind until that point. Well, I mean, it had, but it never hit me like it did the other day. And I just
mm,
went, I've never, ever had to think like that when I'm in a car. What I
mm,
do think about is, do I lock the door in case, I don't know, somebody tries to hijack the car?
yes.
My thinking is very, very different, because actually my experiences are very different. And that's
Mm,
that's the difference in this empathy here is, I haven't had any of your experiences, Darryl, and I'm flabbergasted to think, what would it be like if that happened for me, and how do you not become totally numb to this? In terms of, I know you said you have a laugh with people and go, you're not going to believe this story, but
mm.
there's something about, wow, wow, I'm really quite stuck for words here.
Um, you know, I suppose that there have been periods in my life where I have felt the best way to deal with this is just to be angry and to be bitter and to kind of seek revenge, and then you realize it's about finding the right times and the right moments to be vocal and
Hmm.
to recognize that everyone is on a different spectrum in relation to this, whether it's experiences, whether
Yeah,
it's active participation or silence or whatever it may be. And I think, and I know it's kind of a bit of a cliche, but it just is so relevant, in my opinion, is thinking about Nelson Mandela. And I suppose for him, with all of his experiences, for being put into prison,
mm,
being condemned by the apartheid government of South Africa at the time, probably the most hated individual in the country when he was imprisoned. And to come through all of that and to have a black majority who were able to vote for the first time,
yeah,
elect him as president, and to continue, to make decisions that were about reconciliation, were about education, were about appealing to, listen, this is not only how we feel now as Black Africans, but we've been feeling this way for such a long time. And I suppose that aspect of this is really important.
hmm,
Is saying, yes, we have to talk about the collective experience, but I also have to talk about my experience in terms of interacting with others and being
yeah,
prepared to have difficult conversations, because a lot of time people just say, well, hey, look, I'm not racist, what has it got to do with me? And or have you ever had any issues with racism, Darryl? Aren't things so much better now? And as soon as I start having the conversations about, well, actually, let me tell you,
hmm,
people start to at least, you know, have some level of intellectual understanding, at least. And I suppose in terms of what you said, the cognitive, in terms of the feels, I don't know, I suppose as a public speaker, as somebody who wants to communicate many helpful and helpful messages, there may be an advantage in that ability to think, okay, how can I best communicate this
yeah,
in a way that hopefully will be bringing people together? Because there are some people who are going to be like, I don't care what you have to say, Darryl, on this subject. I've switched off anyway. I'm not even going to start listening. There are going to be some who are on the fence, who are like, we're still not really sure. And I suppose, and there are those who already know what the score is. So I suppose this conversation is more for those who are kind of on the fence, who really they're struggling themselves in terms of knowing what they can do, in what can make the world a better place, in when they should be calling things out. And I would say, again, thinking about the sexism example, which at least 50% of your audience, hopefully, 50% or so of the audience will be like, okay, I know exactly what you mean, Darryl, uh, is if I saw, and I actually have an example of this. I saw um, a couple walking down the street having an argument, and the male was really far more aggressive and
Mhm.
threatening. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to do the Good Samaritan thing. I'm going to follow this couple. I'm going to see if this escalates, and I'll call the police if it gets anywhere.
Yeah.
So I followed them for a while, kept a safe distance. I didn't want to get involved, but I wanted to make sure everything was going to be okay for this lady. So anyway, it got to the stage where they're at a petrol station, and he basically started to hit this woman, hitting, kicking, and I remember thinking, okay, good. It's on a gas station forecourt, and I can, there are people inside the shop, there are people in the forecourt, and so I felt, okay, right, there's a few of us now. And I remember, and I ran over to this guy, and I kind of challenged him. I tackled him, and I was like, and and then she started saying, get off him to me,
Hmm.
stop, and I was like, I'm trying to help you. So I'm trying to hold this guy off, and he's trying to go past me to hit her. Imagine. So he's trying to get through me to hit her. She's trying to pull me off him. Don't. And I'm like, look, I'm trying to help you. So I say to the attendants, like, call the police. I say to people in the forecourt, can you please help me? Why are you just standing there? Let's subdue this guy. Anyway, the police arrive. Do you know what happens?
Did they by any faint chance speak to you first?
Yes,
Hmm.
that's what happened. So I was the one. I was
Mm.
the one that they ran to, and I was kind of like, it's honestly, I'm not the aggressor here. And fortunately, the attendants in the store said, no, 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 it's not him, it's him. So it was a white couple. Not that it makes any difference, but that's in terms of the situation. But it does in terms of who was seen as the aggressor. And I remember walking away. Um, they said to me, "Oh, we might need to take some details from you." What I said to them, the attendant saw everything. Actually, I was so upset with everything that had happened.
Hmm.
The fact that I tried to help this lady, the fact, but the point I suppose I'm trying to make is I still would have done exactly the same because I saw this woman in danger,
Yeah.
and I felt it was my duty to try to help in the best way possible. And some people need to do exactly the same when they see incidents of racism. They need to call it out. They shouldn't decide to walk on by as if it doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to be concerned about it. How I felt in wanting to help this lady, I would hope any other person, male or female, would feel exactly the same. It's not an intellectual decision.
Hmm.
Even though your mind is thinking about all of the outcomes and like, can I help? Should I help? What should I be doing? There's a point where the heart goes, okay, Darryl, you can't go. How are you going to feel going home and going, I wonder what happened to that couple?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yep.
Or calling the police and the police having no idea where the couple went. Oh, I last saw them 20 minutes ago in such and such a street. How's that going to help? So I was like, no, I'm going to follow. And I think people have to just, once you take some action, after the intellect has been stimulated, once there's an intellectual or cognitive understanding, I think it's once you start taking action that can help to build the feels, as you mentioned. That can help
Mm.
to build some of the empathy um,
I,
as well.
yeah, I'd like to jump on this a second to give the audience a little experience of empathy in terms of what you were talking about. So we know, so there is a psychological concept, isn't there, the bystander effect, of people not helping because they become paralyzed with their own, you know, like you said, the thoughts of what can I do, what am I capable of, is it my problem, da da da, all of the things actually that are on your thread about the broken leg. But for me, I'm going to say to the audience, put yourself into Darryl's shoes for just one moment. The bit that you talked about, and this is, I'm going to do it like a film where you kind of slow it down. And there was one moment where you actually said they were in the forecourt and you thought, good. And I'm going to really slow that right down, because I think what you were thinking is there are witnesses. I'm not going to be siloed. I'm not going to be pinpointed as being the aggressor. There is people, there is enough people here for it to be seen as the active action I'm actually taking, which is to do the right thing by this lady.
Yes.
That's the bit that I don't think people understand, is that is your frame of reference before you then go on to, should I intervene? Can I intervene? Da, 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 da. Your first moment of feeling is, will I be seen or outed as the aggressor, the perpetrator? And for me, that's again one of those moments where I don't have to think like that. And that's the bit that I don't think people understand with this white privilege statement, is I don't have to think like that.
Mm, mm. That's a
And
really good, you know, that's a fantastic point. I'm so pleased that you highlighted that you raised that, because yes, that was certainly my, you know, you have to have, I think I mentioned in one of my social media posts, one eye open, one eye closed all of the time, as well as what's actually happening. You have to have this second train of thought that's kind of going, quickly assessing. It's like another kind of computer going, you know, hold on a second, let me just compute quickly all the permutations of this situation. So yes, I considered, I'm in a public space, one. Two, I'm in a space that's going to have CCTV, because it's a forecourt. Three, there are witnesses behind in the store, you know, and there are witnesses on the forecourt, and who can see everything that's happened right from the beginning to the,
mhm,
to the
mhm,
end. And of course, when the police first arrived and they kind of accosted me, the victim, the female victim, she was like, yeah, it was him. And I'm like, in that moment, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, are they really going to believe her? You know, like what could possibly happen to me? Several police officers, me being accused of hitting not only the boyfriend, attacking the boyfriend, but her. This could be a really tragic end, worst case, or a really sticky mess, best case. You know, that was going through my head at that moment in time, thinking, oh, why did I step in?
yeah,
Why did I do this? Like, why is no one willing to help me? And unfortunately, as I mentioned, the attendants were like, whoa, no, this is what happened. And
mhm,
police officers, fortunately, were like, okay, we're happy with your story. You know, they asked me, what happened, sir? I explained, they're like, yeah, that we're happy. That makes sense. Give us your details. We'll be in touch. And I'm thinking, hopefully you won't be. you know, hopefully you'll
yeah,
have more than enough information from the witnesses. But yeah, it's um, I definitely want to to implore people to understand that secondary thought process, which is always there. So you go for a job interview and you're thinking, I wonder if this time I will have, you know, a covert form of racism. I
mhm,
wonder if I don't get this job. So of course, I'm not expecting to get every single job that I would go for, but not knowing, did I not get the job because I wasn't good enough, or was I not given the job because of my skin color? Even that is traumatic. Actually, even that weighs on you, because you're constantly questioning yourself. So, of course, I was driven by going, let me minimize, let me minimize the amount of my thought going towards, am I not good enough, by trying to get better and better and better. So I overcompensated. I overqualified. Spent an exorbitant amount of time to be this superhuman individual in that space, and to mitigate having to think about it anymore. Like, oh, if I didn't, I'm definitely going to get the job. That's what, I was like,
Yeah.
I'll do whatever it takes. I will make sure they cannot say no. But that's a stressor. Even that leads to sleepless nights.
It sounds exhausting.
Yes, it's exhausting, and it's one of the reasons why I left that field, was because it was constantly exhausting. It was I had to do more, even though I was happy to do the work. I felt it was a vindication. Oh, they're asking me to do this.
Mm.
They're asking me to do more hours. They know that they can depend on me. But I was realizing that, hold on a second. I'm suffering with ill health here. I'm not sleeping because I'm doing so many crazy hours. I'm not healthy. I'm getting poor blood test results. I don't feel great. There's something not quite right here. So there was a problem with me working in that way and having that additional burden of trying to be the best and trying to prove myself constantly. And so there were two reasons why I left. The main reason was because I wanted to change. I wanted to focus on my health and well-being, for sure. I wanted to get out of the cut and thrust of that world, which was very, it was very volatile. It was like, very hostile environment in many respects.
Mm.
But also, I think just knowing, one of the catalysts actually was a colleague of mine who was quite senior, who was of my similar heritage to me, and I remember he was kind of pulled over the hot coals, and I knew he had nothing to do. He had no blame. There was no fault at all, and I was one of the only people who was supporting him, and kind of going, I was there all night. I saw what this person did, and it's kind of like, actually, no, we're not interested in what you have to say. We're going to go with what everyone else has to say. And it's like, but they weren't there. They weren't there for the entirety of the time, So even when things like that happen, you're like, oh my goodness, it could happen to him. He's such a successful individual. So he's done so much, and he can still have to fall on the sword. He's the easiest target. Like, what? I don't understand. So yeah, I suppose I started to fall out of love. But the health and well-being world that I thought was going to be a lot more welcoming, and well, we also, we kind of almost have a spiritual engagement with trying to help people, and so altruistic. But then you realize that there are similar barriers. So the barriers to making information accessible, the barriers that exist in terms of different health outcomes, for a wide range of ailments, everything to death in childbirth, to the handling of COVID-19 outcomes are worse for those of BAME persuasion. Like, I mentioned a fact to you earlier about life expectancy on the district line. So you go west to Richmond, and you go east to Barking, and where the demographic changes significantly, and there's a 20-year gap in average life expectancy.
Yeah, that absolutely blew my mind. I mean, I know, obviously, I researched trauma and epigenetics, but even to hear that's in London in 2020, and it's a 20-year difference.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, let's get into let's get into the why. So this is not about, and I am an advocate of, intergenerational trauma being passed down and so on and so forth, and there's the most underwhelming way to talk about child trauma by calling it an ACE, which stands for an adverse childhood experience. So at the moment, that's pretty much the buzzword in the therapeutic world and the trauma-informed world. And yet we know, for example, that 4 ACEs or more, and you're likely to get cancer further down the line or have a shorter life expectancy. Right. But actually, this is about right now in terms of those living conditions, the socioeconomic status, the way that we are taking care of each other. And this is where that racism really comes in as well, isn't it? How I noticed the elitist, the white privilege of most of the people who got the support at the beginning and got the advice certainly weren't the lower socioeconomic communities where the information wasn't shared in exactly the same way.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and again, I mean, I certainly don't want to say this is just a racism problem, because that certainly isn't. It's a socio-economic
Yeah.
issue, and the reason I raise this is because it just really isn't being spoken about in terms of the priority that it should be.
Mm.
So, people often in health and well-being, probably diet is probably the number one kind of asset in that space. If you just eat this way, if you have your really good clean diet, then everything's going to be fine. And if you exercise in a particular way, everything's going to be fine. If you look a certain way, everything's good. If you just take these actions, and you realize a lot of that messaging is another form of elitism. It's another form of like a kind of a class-based society of a superiority. There's kind of almost like superiority ladder of, we're really healthy because we just know what we're doing and we have access to the best resources, and I'm just all knowledgeable and doing all the right things. And if you just did the right things, everything's going to be fine. And then you have those at the bottom of the pile who don't have access to the resources. Even if they did, it's not accessible for them. It's not written in a way that is meaningful. It's seen as patronizing. It's devoid of any cultural or class-based significance. I.e., don't you understand that we eat different foods, or the foods you're saying that are we have to avoid? It's a significant part of my heritage. Like what are you saying? Why are you saying my foods are bad, but your choices are good? So I think there were so many reasons as to why people in those communities were like, you're so out of touch. I remember once being an audience member at a conference, and the panelists were talking about, it's just so easy to eat clean, so easy to make the right choices. You can do it on a budget. And I said, can you, I'm like, there's some people who are going to be appalled by that statement, who are going to be going, you have no idea. You mentioned extra virgin olive oil, for example. Do you really think some of the poorest members of our society can spend like £2 or £3 on some olive oil? Like, I mean, do you understand how far that £3 would need to go for that family? They would want to be creating entire meals, not just what you use to dress your salad. I'm like, you really have no idea. And they kept on insisting that no, it's so simple. You can, I'm like, oh my goodness, no, it isn't simple. It is really difficult to improve your health with a lot of these measures.
Yeah.
Even those of us who know all the stuff we should be doing struggle with it. So, so like, why are you assuming it's so easy? And that's one of the reasons why those individuals, why there is that 20-year gap. And unfortunately, the elitist aspect of this tends to be, it's your fault. That's what sickens me. It's like, it's your fault that you're suffering with obesity. It's your fault that you have this chronic disease. If only you listened to me, if only you defied conventional wisdom, everything will be fine. And it reminds me of when I used to be involved in an evangelical church when I was young, and I was saved and I was born again, and I was enlightened, and I was trying to tell everyone, if you just listen to me, then everything will be fine for you. It's like that, telling people, if you just do this, if you just follow these steps and come with me, everything will be fine. And of course, you're patronizing people. People need to make up their own mind. If they want to talk about it, they will. Make it in the form that's accessible. Don't believe you know everything. have a discussion without saying, I disagree with you because I just know that I'm right. Like, really, you're not listening. You're just telling people what to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And yeah, so that makes me feel very uncomfortable seeing that increasing division in the health and well-being world, which tends to be blaming that it's all about willpower, it's all about self-responsibility, um, not thinking about the social constructs that are in place that make it more difficult, the educational constructs that make it more difficult, the challenges in particular environments. There's no whole. I haven't got a Whole Foods in my neighborhood. I can't even. I can't even see any fresh fruit and veg where in my community set. There were some communities like that. You know,
Well,
we.
yeah, I'm thinking this is where we start talking about the levels of poverty, don't we? And then and what tends to happen is then we start talking about this. There are some communities that are in abstract poverty, and there are more children at this point in time than ever recorded, starving, hungry, not being fed because there isn't enough money in the families. They're
Mm,
then going to the school breakfast clubs, which is, and just thinking about that reference to what they should and shouldn't eat, where the schools are going, we've got bread because we can feed 30 children that haven't been fed at home. So
yes.
we're going to give them toast in the morning.
Mm,
And whilst I know and I can come from that, in inverted commas, biohacking framework, I know that bread's probably not the best form of food.
mm,
But I also know if it's the only bloody food you're getting, then damn right you get that down your neck because
yeah.
you need to survive.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
if that's what that family's living with, then you can bet your bottom dollar that that family's living in a heightened stressed state, which is having an effect on their autonomic nervous arousal. This is not just about food choices. This is not just about the fact that the diabetes is higher in certain areas, and then it gets blamed on diet. And I think, well, that's because you make these clean foods so elite. For
Yes.
example, the organic stuff, just eat organic. I'm like, single parent growing up with my two boys growing up. Yes, I did buy organic, but I had to work bloody hard to get the money. I couldn't have done it on what they now call universal credit. I just couldn't have done.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
So there's something about, I understood that I was sacrificing one thing to put food on the table that was of good quality.
Mm,
But I also know that I grew up in a family where we were fed on what were called economy meals, and it was
mm,
whatever we could afford at that time because of the climate, because that's how it was.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know that I see most of the trauma on the lower socioeconomic status areas and districts, and
Mm,
yet that's the area that's not being given the trauma informed support to
yeah.
actually say, let's have a look at the socioeconomics that are going on here.
Yes.
um,
Yes. Yes.
where I live, we've now got a really, really large community of African Americans, and they've kind of gone, right, what we're going to do is we're going to put them over here, and they've shoved them all in really close housing and in between, in with each other. There's fighting, there's been stabbings, and I'm thinking, what would it be like to live there? Well, it's, you eat what you can, you survive as best as you can, and then when you're, I don't know, old enough or whatever, then you get out of there. And I think it's the same for any big city, but particularly London. 20 years is a massive difference, and that has got to be understood at government level. There's
Yeah. I
got to
mean,
be
yeah.
people that know that.
Yeah, I mean it has, and I mean we know, we've had austerity for the last 10 years, and now I suppose we know there's going to be an impending economic consequence of the lockdown and the furlough scheme and everything else, that
Mm.
people losing their jobs. So we're certainly not out of the woods, and we've got a long way to go, but that's only going to, I suppose, exacerbate this division of those who are okay, the haves and the have-nots, and yeah, I think it's what's driven me even more, as best as possible with primal play and the primal play method, to think about accessibility and inclusivity, and making sure I'm producing materials that people will say, oh, you know, I can recognize myself. I can recognize my parents on your products. There's something real world about what I'm trying to do. And that's one of the reasons why I've gone down this route of you don't need to be in a gym. And I'm not saying it in a kind of a token way. I'm like, you need to remove as many barriers as possible. If if you
Hmm.
can't afford a gym and you feel, oh, if only I could go to a gym, I could be fit, everything would be fine. You know, if you,
Well, that's the message that's sold to you, isn't it? You need to be at a gym because
yeah,
otherwise you're not doing proper fitness.
yeah, exactly. You're not doing proper fitness. You know, you may not be able to go out for a run in your neighborhood. You may not be able to go to your, you may not have a local park. You may not have a garden. So, what can I do at home?
Hmm.
What can I do without any tools? What can I do even if I haven't got any training gear? We have to be a bit more open to saying there are other options. There are simple ways that you can improve your health without it being, detrimental to your mental health. Like, yeah, just do these things. And then you're challenged by, oh my gosh, how can I get all that in? How can I fit it in? The time, the money, the resources. I have no idea, the confusion. Actually, let's keep it simple. Let's make sure it's healthful and helpful. And, but, at the same time, as somebody working for themselves, you also have the issue of there isn't necessarily money in that message.
Yeah.
Like, if I tell people in a genuine way that this is, look, here are some simple things you can do, then I've done a really good job. If people go, okay, that's great. I don't need you, Darryl. I don't need your expertise because you've just given me the answer.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line, I suppose. And I'm hoping I'm setting up I suppose a suite of products and information that can cater for different audiences. So for those who just want, give me something
Hmm.
simple, give me something free, I can come in, take it, use it, great. And then for those who want a bit more support, those who want to dive in a little bit more, I'm providing those services and have that provision as well. So I don't want to alienate, I suppose, anyone. That's right, in the best way possible, and making sure that I can offer resources that will help the widest array of individuals.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you do give away your free playouts 3 times a week, don't you, on Instagram? So, and I think that's a fantastic way of showing people actually, because I think it must be a small space that you have within your flat, and it really does go. Here we are doing the exercises, and this is how you do it in your own home.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like I'm in a small, I'm in my living room. I pretty much just got a mat on the floor, and that's the space that I kind of occupy. So yeah, it's a real world scenario. You can
Hmm.
see me doing things. You can try those out if you're able to do so, and you don't need lots of space, and you can challenge yourself, but still have a bit of fun. Still do things that are quite interesting. So yeah, there's a way to challenge.
I'm tiring. Tiring. I never knew pogo jumps could actually. They're
Yeah, and I'm sure, when people use the pogo, do pogo jumps in listening to different bands or whatever, like they could probably do that for hours and hours. It'd be like, yeah, whatever, because you're just so in the moment and you're having fun.
Mhm.
It's incredible when I think about when I was younger and the amount of energy and that zest for life. And with Primal Play, I'm trying to kind of recreate that
Yeah.
in exercise form, in movement form. It's like, yeah, take some of that joy and infuse it into this session of play, this play out rather than working out. And a lot of time the time kind of flies by. I'm like, oh wow, the session's over, and I know I've done quite a bit, but that was
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
good.
And for me, the thing that I noticed, so when we first started going into lockdown, I think picking up that London aspect was all of the high-rise flats that I saw on the news. And obviously, as it was panning over, this is what London looks like under lockdown. I looked at each one of those high-rise flats and went, how many are in those flats? Single parents, parents with children, you know, people who are now segregated. And actually, there is something about they're not going out because we weren't allowed out right at the very beginning.
Mm,
That's a time when people will sit and ruminate, and they're not exercising, and they're in fight flight stages. So they will
Yes.
go through cyclical moments of I'm bored, I'll eat, I'm
Oh,
hungry, I'll eat, I'm tired, I'll eat. You
mm,
know, I can't get, you know, and we're back to that kind of food um, analogy again. All I can get from the supermarket is the cereals and the pasta, and that's what I'll do. I'll have my comfort food. So there
mm,
was something about, I looked at a health disaster right at the beginning of COVID, going, I don't think it's COVID that's going to cause the biggest problem. I think it's what's happening right now in terms of
mm,
lockdown and the choices that we're making or not making. And then being told you could exercise once a day, but not being told actually you can exercise within your homes, or there's lots of ways you can do this. Again, that lacking information.
mm, mm.
It was, you know, go for a walk, as though that's this. And I'm aware that Hippocrates used to say it, but and thanks to you, I think you put that in your slides as well.
Yeah.
But there's also something about a walk doesn't solve everything. The same as, you know, biohacking doesn't solve everything. The same as, you know, even coming to a therapist doesn't solve everything. You have to have a multitude of options and interventions, and it's multifactorial. And I
Yeah.
think this is where we're a bit stuck at the moment.
Yes, I mean that's a really good point, and I mean I certainly was happy with the messaging in relation to exercise because I live in a flat, no garden, so that was when they announced lockdown. That was what I was waiting to hear. So I was listening out for like, okay, so what are the exceptions? And
Yeah,
one exception was, yeah, you can go out and exercise, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness for that.
yeah.
And so I went out day one of the lockdown. I'm like, I'm going out every single day, rain or shine. I don't care. And there was some, even doing that though, there was some additional anxiety, of like, no one on the streets, being kind of almost panicky around making sure you're avoiding people. And so even though I felt, okay, I'm reasonably healthy and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I'm doing something healthy by going for a walk. It was a really challenging time for many people, not being
Mhm.
able to see certain family members, not being able to like, live life as you were even just a few days before. So yeah, I think there's a physical health, hurdle to come, significant one, and the mental health challenge.
Well,
We,
I kind of have a I don't know whether it's a rhetorical question. No, it's not rhetorical, because I think there's a bit maybe we could chat about. But do you think that these riots and uprisings and all of the things that are currently happening around Black Lives Matter at the moment,
mm,
I'm making a kind of proposal suggestion here that actually I think it's because we've been under lockdown for so long that we've been suppressed or depressed.
yes,
I think
yes,
what is actually happening is this is the so usually in a trauma response we have a withdrawal at some point, but then we come out and there's a resurgence. And I'm
mm.
wondering if this is, you know, displaced anger as well as, you know, the fact that people are genuinely angry.
Yeah, that's a really really good point, and I mean we know that the most of the protests are peaceful, and we know that with the protests there's been violence instigated on both sides, um, but yeah, I think you I can't condone violence, and I would wish that all of the protests would be peaceful. That would be
Mhm.
a grandiose hope that that would be the case. But at the same time, it's forged this conversation to continue. I think it's maintained a higher level of awareness of this problem. I don't think we would have been talking about this now if there hadn't have been a protest. It just
No.
would have been a news item, George Floyd, or how tragic, move on. That's what would have happened. We still would be probably talking about Dominic Cummings or something. So
Hmm.
I think there's, can't condone it, but I can kind of understand some of the frustration. I certainly do agree that I'm sure some of that frustration, um, was part of the, oh, we've just been locked down. Now we can go out and show the world how we really feel. The downside to that is that some people will feel that it doesn't honor the memory of George Floyd.
Yeah.
and the true essence of what Black Lives Matter means, and that it will alienate some people. But at the same time, I also think about the protests in the 60s, the civil rights
Yeah.
marches.
Yeah.
Selma, Bridge, Martin Luther King, people of all colors who were marching, and the police brutality and the brutality of people watching, and so even during the most peaceful of protests, there was the same sort of reaction. Like, we don't want to do anything, we don't want to change the world. You deserve to be brutalized, and 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 so yeah, something needs to change, and it needs to be done very, very quickly to try to pacify the protesters. I would say that's what people should be thinking about, who are in power and authority. And again, if we think this is just a Black Lives Matter thing, think about the poll tax riots. Think about the suffragettes, the women who fought for the right to vote. Yeah, they protested silently to begin with. They protested like, "Oh, please, can you please give us the vote?" Men were like, "No, it's not going to happen. Sorry." So
Mm-hmm.
they had to be heard. You know, that's what happened. It's a part of history. Peasants revolting, for example, against aristocracy. All of these events that we've seen in history, unfortunately, haven't been resolved by peaceful, demonstrations alone. They usually do escalate, unfortunately.
Okay, I have one more thing that I actually has just popped in my head again. I'm probably going to go and write another blog on this one anyway, because it's something I've been paying attention to, because I'm aware that I will need to shoot off, and I've had quite a bit of your time as well, Darryl. So the difference between all of those earlier riots and where we are in today, technology, and I'm going to come back to something you'd said on one of your other interviews, but also I've heard other people saying, I think at the moment what we're doing is we're now able to see much more through digital media. We're filming. I mean, the news has become something that every person does. We're all news reporters now, aren't we? If we've got a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, there's something about the George Floyd video. Actually, I stumbled across it, and I have this big thing about cyber traumas, and coming across material that's really not suitable for people to be watching in a kind of third person capacity.
Mm-hmm.
The difference for me was, I think one of the sentences I have heard Black people saying is that could have been me, and I think you eloquently said it, actually, that's one of the things that research has shown, is that you would embody that visual experience in a very different way to somebody that's perhaps white, or and for me there's something about, I tend to look, because I'm quite empathic, and obviously I have to be. I'm a therapist. I'd be shitting my job if I wasn't. That I look at these videos, and the reason they affect me so badly is I go, oh my God, that could have been. And I go through a whole list of, that could have been somebody I knew, that could have been this person, that could have been that person, that could have been that person. And right now, with all of the horrors that are happening, I'm wondering how this is being embodied by Black people who are watching the rioting, the murders, the brutality, all of the different experiences, because it's coming at you constantly, particularly on social media feeds.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, it's yeah. I mean, it's just another additional layer of the trauma that I've had since a young child. That's how I see it. So, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned in that research study, which I think was published in the Lancet, of comparing a Black person witnessing an unarmed person being killed and a white person doing so, regardless of the race of the victim. But yeah, white people tend to say, "Oh, that was an individual incident, had nothing to do with me. How tragic, how awful, but I'm fine."
Yeah,
And a Black person's more likely to go, "That could have been me." They think it could have been me, my brother, my cousin, my uncle, my dad.
yeah,
And so we embody this, we internalize it, And that's what I always feel whenever I see any of these videos. I'm like, oh my goodness, that could have been me if I was in that town, if I was, and I've had conversations like that on social
Mm.
media for people who, one message I had yesterday was, you know, George Floyd. There's no proof that George Floyd was asphyxiated. There's no
Really?
there's no proof that he's even dead. It was all staged, and I'm just like, you know, people actually believe this, and you said to yourself, well, look, he's just one idiot, you know, and I replied to him, and then you realize there are a lot of people who that have that view. They are so concerned about facing up to reality by
Hmm.
admitting there is this problem. They have to run so far away from it and put it into the conspiracy theory box and go, oh,
Yeah.
actually, have you got any proof? I wasn't there. Yeah, I wasn't there to see it. It didn't happen. Oh, really? Is that what we've come to now?
Yeah. Well, it's almost the same as the propaganda pages and yeah, and the conspiracy pages of where's the XYZ? Yeah, it's social media is a double-edged sword. It really is, isn't it?
It is.
But I'm generally taken aback by people in terms of yeah, when they do and say things on the internet and then come back with an answer, but you don't know that. And I go, right, okay, clearly, I'm not even going to get into the argument with you, because if that's where we're starting, you don't know that. I think we're done on the conversation.
That's a good. Yeah, I think I need to do more of that actually. Yeah, I'm unfortunately have a bit of a hero complex. Like I've got to save the world. I've got to, I like proving people wrong. So I'm like, I'll pull out this research. Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. And I suppose sometimes you've got to. I've realized actually that I found the best way to communicate some of this is through the use of metaphors. It's completely stripping away.
Yep.
I know more than you because I've got this study. Because usually they just go, well, I've got another study, so
Well, that sounds like me and my son in terms of that. I shouldn't have brought him up to be a critical thinker, because that's exactly what happens. Is I'll go, oh, there's this. So, yeah.
yeah,
Generally, it's around fit. Generally, it's around fitness.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, you want to be critical, but you also still, but you still want to be. I suppose you still want to be open to recognizing that you could still be as critical as I am, as fair as I am. I could still be wrong. I may still be on the wrong side of history or whatever it may be. And I think as humans are storytellers. That's a universal way of communication. And if you think about it, most and other big shifts in terms of humanity shifts have been on the back of great storytelling, of great speeches, of empowering people. So I think I'm trying to be better at creating these stories, at creating these metaphors of saying, think of it this way, so that both you and I can remove ourselves from this, and I present it in this way where we're both independent, but we can see it completely objectively and go, oh my goodness, oh, now that's pretty clear, that's pretty vivid.
Yeah.
We need to be better at doing that. I don't know the answer as to how we can do that, but I'm certainly working at, like with a comic strip, for example, in some of my writing, I'm trying to create this more plain English, like, look how stark the contrast is here,
Yeah, well, that's the thing about metaphor, and I work creatively in therapy, and most of it, the big aha moments happen through metaphor. When something's happening, maybe in the sand tray, and I go, well, that's interesting. Have you noticed that character? Oh, oh, okay. I'll just leave that with you a minute for while that just processes and percolates. But I will put a link to the comic series, because I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely brilliant, because each point that you made is, and I did laugh at the stop pulling the brace card. That did make me laugh. But there was something about, these are the answers, these are the concepts that people come back with.
Yeah.
And
That was one of my favorites. Yeah, there's a couple in there that I definitely was hoping to get a laugh out of. But yeah, again, hopefully the laugh just makes you go, hold on a second. this is just idiotic, you know, like some of the reasoning behind and justification for a particular viewpoint is like, just look at it from this point of view. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I felt that way, or I've
Yeah.
posed that question, or you know. So but yeah, it's you know, try not to focus too much on the negatives. I think the positives around this are people are still talking about this. People are certainly showing their true colors, whatever that is.
Hmm.
Of course, there are some people who aren't going to be genuine. Again, whichever side of the fence they're on, they're going to try
Oh,
to.
well, those are the ones that go, oh, I've got black friends. Oh, I'm like, great, good for you.
Yeah, you know,
Good for you.
does it, you know, does it change? Does it, you know, it doesn't necessarily change the way that you may be a part of this problem, because we're all part. I mean, so that's the thing that we humans need to understand. We are all part of this problem. You
Yes.
know, I couldn't. I tried to separate myself from racism by becoming more successful. I believed, part of me, small part of me believed, oh, one day I'll become so successful it won't matter. You know,
Hmm.
the most success, well, the leader of the free world a few years ago, Barack Obama, as they like to use that term, leader of the free world, you know, he was the most prominent, one of the most prominent individuals on the planet, and he still faced overt and covert racism. You know,
Yeah.
he couldn't escape it, no matter what his character, no matter how blemish free his presidency, and you know, it didn't matter. And when you hear again, when you speak to professionals, when you speak to actors, I remember Samuel L. Jackson talking once about he was standing on a corner speaking to some friends in LA, and you know, whoop whoop, police, you know, like jumped out the car with the guns, and you know, they were kind of like, oh, that's Samuel L. Jackson. Oh my gosh, I've made a mistake. You know, like like
Mm,
even Samuel L. Jackson will be pulled over in his car and questioned, and if the officer doesn't recognize him, he could be in a lot of trouble. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Why does it have to take? Yeah, there's nothing that excuses that sort of behavior, of course, but that's the reality that anyone of my heritage understands. You can't escape it. Successful, unsuccessful, rich, poor, whatever, from whatever walk of life, from the most diverse communities to the least diverse, wherever you are, you'll be subjected to something that is going to be
Yeah.
kind of holding you down, to varying degrees.
And that's the narrative we've got to change. That's what we've got to do. So thank you immensely for this conversation.
You're welcome, Kath. I really appreciate it, and thanks again for all your support. It's much appreciated. That's for sure.